How's it going, y'all? Welcome back to the Runaway Train Sports Podcast. I am your host, Dakota Oy Boiler in Texas on most social media platforms. We are here to talk about Purdue's football game against the Michigan Wolverines, as well as make our official predictions for the 2023-24 men's basketball season. We're going to start with Purdue's game against Michigan, and we'll end with what I think we all want to start focusing on sooner rather than later, men's basketball. Let's go ahead. Let's jump on into it. We're not going to talk about Michigan for too long, mainly just because I think it went about as well as all of us assumed it would be, if not a little better, but the result was still the same. Purdue went into Ann Arbor in prime time to take on Michigan in their first game back after the allegations of sign stealing came out over their bye week. Michigan came out very, let's just say, confident and a bit aggrieved online with having to take on Purdue in this one, especially after Ryan Walters did nothing but tell the truth after with his comments in his presser before the game began. Michigan came out in this one very hot, ended up taking the lead 20-0 in the second quarter before Purdue's defense really, I think, settled in, actually got some stops, got some turnovers, and was able to rattle in 6 points going into the half down 20-6. I think I can speak for most of us that I think was pretty much the best case scenario, or might have been even a little better than some of us were expecting. I know I was definitely one of them. I was expecting there to be blood, and it definitely looked like it was going to go that way, especially early with Michigan scoring touchdowns on their first 2 touches with the ball, and Purdue being effectively unable to move the ball with any relative consistency at all. In the third quarter, Purdue actually, the defense was, we're going to talk about the defense a lot primarily just because it really was the bright spot in this one, that Purdue's defense absolutely went out and held Michigan, I think pretty much in bay for the most part in the entire second half, only letting up a touchdown in the third quarter and 2 touchdowns in the fourth as Michigan continued to run up the score, trying to make it look a little worse than it actually was. So Purdue's defense, absolutely night and day difference. I think back to when we played Fresno State in week 1 and the defense that we put out there against Fresno and the defense that we put out there yesterday, as of time of recording this, against one of the best teams in the country in their own house. Purdue held Michigan. This is the stuff I'm really interested in. Michigan rushed for 110 yards on 34 carries, good enough for a 3.2 average. Which honestly is worse than Purdue's. Purdue ran the ball 29 times for 125 yards and a 4.3 per carry average. That's right. Purdue averaged a higher yards per carry than Michigan on their own field. Purdue's defense was absolutely dominant. Not necessarily, we can't say dominant, but Purdue's defense came to play in the second half, and it really does go to show. They held their own against Michigan, and if the offense was even a fraction of what it could be going into the next couple of years, I think this is actually much more of a game than Michigan would like to admit. So all things considered, when you just look at Purdue's defense versus Michigan's offense, yes, Michigan put up 41 points, but that's just Michigan's going to do that. They're going to out-talent you. They're going to out-physical you, and they did do that. But at the end of the day, I think if you actually watched the game and didn't just look at the box score, you saw a lot of really, really good things coming from Purdue's defense. So I'm excited to see what Coach Walt can continue to do with this squad. And once the 24 recruiting class gets on campus, boy, it could really take a next step going into next year. Let's see. Purdue's lone touchdown on the day came basically at the death. Deion Burks getting loose on I think it was a 24-yard catch and run on 4th down with about 20 or something odd seconds left. The best part about it, though, that touchdown ensured a Purdue cover, and it was probably the greatest day on Twitter for Purdue fans, just because we expected to lose anyway, and Michigan fans talked a lot of smack on Twitter before the game even began, talking about how they were going to annihilate us, and they couldn't even cover in prime time in their first game out of a bye against Purdue. Purdue put up more points on Michigan than any other team this year, as well as that's a crazy stat to say in general. Their season average, I think, was a .875 or 8.875 or something like that. Purdue actually beat it with the 2 field goals in the first half. but they blew it out of the water over doubling up their season average on points allowed. So all in all, it's one of those weird games where if you watched it, you could tell Purdue was never in it. But if you look at the silver linings, like I'd love to do, you saw a lot of good things come from it. Yeah. What can we really say? Purdue went into Michigan in prime time and lost by 28. So I think all things considered, if you really look at it and take a step back and look at the silver lining, it went exactly like we expected it to. But at the same time, it still somehow was better than it ever could have been. I'm pretty sure. So we're going to it is what it is, and we'll move on from there. I really have no more interest in talking about Michigan. I just find it funny that they couldn't cover against a two-win team. They couldn't keep Purdue under their season average in points allowed, and they cheated to do so, allegedly. And so we'll move on from there. Let's take a look and see what happened around the Big Ten this weekend. And then we'll get into the good stuff. We'll start talking about Purdue basketball, and we'll prepare for the season to start. But by the time this actually comes out, and you're listening to it, probably more than just a few hours here on Monday. College basketball is officially going to be back. But first, take a quick look around the Big Ten. Ohio State went to Rutgers, walked out with a 35-16 win. A game that definitely got a little more wide open as the game came down to it. Rutgers actually did a very good job in doing what they needed to do to keep it close, but not doing enough to actually be able to pull it off. There were plenty of opportunities for Rutgers in this one. They ended up in the red zone a lot and just weren't able to convert into points or sometimes even touchdowns. So honestly, Rutgers definitely having a good season. This is definitely not a loss that you're looking at. You're looking at it more as a what if and not necessarily like Purdue did with Michigan. So good on ya, Rutgers. Penn State marched into November, Maryland's, and wiped the floor with them 51-15. Penn State was dominant in this one, including a 27-point fourth quarter. Penn State, pretty good at the football. I think one of the bigger surprises on the day, Indiana hosting Wisconsin, walking out with a W, 20-14. Indiana obviously also going into this weekend a 2-win team, looked pretty good. And honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking at that last game of the season with a little more nerves, a little more hesitation than I was perhaps even a week ago. Indiana, really good win. Wisconsin obviously dealing with some injuries in the running back room, but at the end of the day, they did not look good. And Indiana walked out with a dub. So good on them for that. Another one, Nebraska went to Michigan State and lost 20-17. Michigan, just a very similar game. I think Michigan State looked very good most of the way through this one. And Nebraska just really struggled to get anything going before it really just got away from them and time ran out and Michigan State gets a dub over Nebraska. No one wants to win the West. That's really what we're learning here. But we'll get on to the team that looks like they're probably going to win the West, and it's very funny. Illinois walks into Minnesota and walks out with a 27-26 win over the Fighting PJ Flex. Illinois has been on an absolute roll here the last few weeks, and they're definitely not looking like the same team that Purdue absolutely housed near the beginning of Big Ten play. So congratulations to Illinois. They've definitely been playing a lot better than recent, and I'm definitely gonna have to start taking that into consideration when I do my pre-weekend picks. And then finally, the Big Ten West game of the year. Iowa at Northwestern. I did some air quotes for you audio listeners. Some air quotes at Northwestern. Played in Wrigley Field. The turf was basically unusable. There was plenty of times where they had to pause the game to try and stamp the turf back into place, and it went about as well as you could. Iowa wins 10-7, and that's really all you need to know about this one. I mean, that's the perfect Iowa football game, 10-7. And I'll point out that the over/under on points for this game started at 29.5 and ended at 30.5. I believe, I can't remember who Iowa plays next, but I think I saw the over/under was officially set at 28.5 on the opening line. Will it be the first college football game ever to have an over/under set at kickoff at under 30? I think it really might, because oh boy, Iowa is 7-2, 4-2 in the Big Ten. They're probably going to win the West at this rate, and they are going to score maybe 2 points a game doing it. So good on you, Iowa, if that's really what you want. So it is what it is. But that was the results of the Big Ten this weekend. We'll cover the games coming up next weekend in our next pod before the weekend begins. But we're gonna move now. So I think the topic all of us much more rather talk about at this point, because Purdue basketball is officially back. Purdue takes on Samford in the first game of the season on Monday night, November 6th. And I think I'd be remiss to not talk about these Samford little vignettes on Twitter about this little 5'7" guard who they're touting, supposedly at this point, as going to be taking the opening tip-off versus Zach Edey. And I said this on Twitter earlier that if they do not, it is an affront to the college football universe, and they will pay dearly for it. And so it's been a lot of fun to follow. They're definitely taking it about as seriously as I think they should. I'm looking forward to seeing Purdue get out there and play some live action games that count. I'm looking forward to seeing the development continue and these guys start to gel and get this season underway. But that's not why we're here. We're not going to talk about Samford too much, just because I think this is a game that Purdue should win pretty much going away. It's the first one of the season, yada, 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 etc., etc. We are here to talk about the official Boiler in Texas predictions for the 2023-24 season. And we're going to start off I have 5 total predictions, and we're going to kind of talk about them, and then we'll get out of here as we prepare for the opening rounds of the college basketball season. My first prediction, and I put this one first just because I think this is going to be not necessarily this is probably the realism side of it coming in. Not that the others don't have realism in it, but my first official prediction is that Purdue basketball will not go undefeated in the non-conference. It's no secret that this season's non-conference schedule is probably one of the tougher in the country. And in recent years, Purdue has played some tough non-conference schedules and come out of it relatively unscathed, if not undefeated. I believe they've seen that the last 2 years, Purdue came out of the non-conference undefeated. I don't think with this schedule, Purdue will come out of this non-conference undefeated. But just because we lose a game in the non-conference, I think this might be a situation where we might be better off because of it. I think as last season started to unroll with the way that the non-conference went, Purdue won the PK 85. They rolled into New Year's undefeated. And then once Big Ten play started, I think you could tell that the pressure started to ramp up a little bit until they lost that first game to Rutgers, I believe it was. If it was, it had completely wiped that game from my memory. But I think this team last year was, and in the last couple of years, has let that pressure build. And so I think maybe even taking a loss to a good team, I don't think Purdue is ever going to get blown out in the non-conference, but I think Purdue might drop one in the non-conference, and I think it'll be good to leave the pressure. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on these guys' shoulder going into this year, but let them, lose a game. Purdue's going to lose a game this year. Getting one out of the way early may not be the worst thing in the world. But there it is. My first prediction, Purdue basketball will not go undefeated in the non-conference this year. Moving on to my next prediction is basically the inverse of that. Purdue will win the Big Ten regular season title this year. Purdue won the conference last year with essentially the same team, only losing a couple of pieces. They bring back pretty much everybody. There are some teams around the conference that are going to look drastically different, some of which got better, some of which also brought back a large chunk and added some new key pieces, looking at teams like Michigan State, Maryland. Illinois is very feisty looking so far as we lead up to the season. But I do think that Purdue will have enough to win the regular season back-to-back from last year to this year. And I think it'll definitely be closer. I don't think Purdue's going to win the regular season by 3 games like they did last time. I could even see it depending on how Michigan State's freshmen, get into their system and adjust to the college game. It could even be a season that they share the title, or it comes down to that March 2nd game with Michigan State at Mackey Arena. I think it'll be a little bit closer, but I think this is a season where you're going to be looking at 4 fewer losses in the Big Ten, wins you an outright title. And potentially pushing 5 may get you a share. But I do think Purdue will have enough. I think this is a team that's only going to continue to gel and get better and grow into their new roles. They're going to be very similar roles to last year, but as they continue to grow into their new roles and add in their own new wrinkles and pieces, that will do enough to win the Big Ten regular season. Moving on to my third prediction, Big Ten tournament. I predict that Purdue will be in the final of the Big Ten tournament. Now, this one I went back and forth a lot on just because it would make a lot of sense that, if Purdue is good enough to win the regular season title and, show enough to win a back-to-back regular season title against this Big Ten. I think I went back and forth on if I wanted to predict Purdue to win the Big Ten tournament, but we have seen in years past that even if Purdue had the better team, that didn't necessarily always mean that they would win the Big Ten title. Obviously, the Big Ten tournament has always been a bit of a mystery when it comes to Purdue. It's been very hit or miss. There's been plenty of opportunities in the final where Purdue just was unable to get it done. So I'm predicting Purdue will make the Big Ten tournament final. If we end up winning it, it might just come down to matchups and see who makes it. Kind of similar to last year where we faced Penn State in the final. It's going to come down to matchups, just like most tournaments do. But I think Purdue will be good enough to make the Sunday final, and we'll have to see how it goes. Moving on to my fourth prediction, Purdue will be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament again for the second time in as many seasons. With the combination of returning production and a schedule with plenty of opportunities for marquee wins, I think Purdue stays on the one line for the NCAA tournament again this year. This is something that Purdue needs to strive for, starting as one of the consensus, top 3 or at minimum top 5 teams in the country. They're going to be battling for a top seed line going into the tournament again. And yes, I know that means we'll face the dreaded 16 seed again, as I'm sure we'll hear plenty about as the season, winds down as we head towards the tournament. But I think Purdue will be good enough this year to get on the 1 seed line again, give ourselves another good opportunity to make some stuff happen in March. And I keep saying this on basically every year, that Purdue has now put itself in a position to continually put themselves in good positions. And what do I always say? If you continue to put yourself in good positions, eventually you got to break through. And this could be the year that we see it. And then my final prediction for Purdue in the 2023-24 basketball season is that Purdue will go to the Final Four for the first time in over 40 years, and Coach Painter finally breaks through, and this program gets to celebrate what we had hoped for in the last handful of years, but never able to do, going to Phoenix, Arizona for the Final Four and competing for a chance at a national championship. Yes, Purdue is bringing back essentially the same team that lost to a 16 seed in the 2022-23 tournament. That's going to have its pros and cons. One of the biggest advantages is that there won't be any major new discoveries in terms of from this year to last year. It's going to allow us to focus on developing, this system and this team, while allowing our younger guys to continue to grow and develop into their roles without any major over expectations or over pressuring them. That I think we may have seen a little bit on Fletcher and Braden towards the end of last year. But then obviously on the other side of that same coin, the biggest con is that this is still largely the same team that lost to a 16 seed, only the second team to ever do it. And the only question is can Purdue overcome their biggest shortcomings? We've seen, obviously, in their exhibition loss to Arkansas, a lot of those same those same issues and problems that plagued us towards the end of last season. And the real question is can they figure it out? I mean, only time will tell. We'll find out as the season begins tomorrow. But if they can figure it out, it'll bode very well enough to be one of the best seasons Purdue has seen in a very long time. There's a lot of expectations on this program, but honestly, at this point, that's the way I want it to be. I want Purdue to go into every season as a top 5, top 10 program. I want them to finally be able to break through. I want them to learn, to grow and develop and perform with these expectations on their back. We've seen a lot of Purdue fans online always talking about how they much rather prefer to be the underdog role because then all of the pressure's off. I mean, it's a lot easier to go in and try and take down Goliath when you're David. It's a lot harder when all eyes and targets are on you to be able to perform. And I think that's where Purdue needs to get to. Purdue needs to be able to take this one on the chin, go into this season with something to prove, and execute. And you know what? I'm going to enjoy every single step and game along the way. I don't think, I kind of went over this a little bit with my first prediction of not going undefeated in the non-conference. If this turns out to be a year where Purdue kind of takes their lumps in the regular season, but they continue to get better and shore up the issues that we've seen, I'm okay with it. I think Purdue will still be plenty good enough to win the Big Ten, plenty good enough to make the Big Ten final, plenty good enough to be a 1 seed. The real question is, are we going to be able to learn these lessons? Is Coach Painter and this coaching staff going to be able to get over the hump? And I think this is a team that is well designed to do it. They have a very high floor, and the ceiling potentially could be even higher than it was last year, or even the ceiling could be even higher than the year before with Jaden Ivey still at the helm, where we don't have to go into the results of that one. But this is just a point where Purdue basketball just has one of the higher floors of anyone else in the country. I mean, you're going to have the returning National Player of the Year, a 7'4" monster down low. And you're going to have a point guard that's going to be fearless and really dominated at points last season as well. So I don't know. I could ramble on here for a very, very long time about what I think is going to happen this year. But at this point, I think I'm just excited to see the season start. There's been a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of talk online. There's been a lot of speculating. There's been a lot of analyzing. There's been a lot of guesswork and educated guessing. But until you actually go out there and step on the hardwood, the ball is tipped, the game gets underway, you see the ball go through the hoop, there's no feeling quite like it. But there is my five official Purdue basketball predictions of the year. I'm really excited for this season to get started. I think a lot of fans are going to get very focused on just pure results, and they're going to be waiting until March. But I can promise you this is going to be one of those seasons that you're going to want to enjoy. You're going to want to sit down. You're going to want to watch the games. You're going to want to enjoy the process as well, because at this point, these kind of seasons only come around so often, and I'm going to be enjoying every single night out. I'm excited to see these young guys continue to develop. I'm excited to see the wrinkles that we've seen Zach add to his game. Obviously taking a three in their second exhibition game that almost went down. We've seen some new post moves from Zach. We've seen him take threes. We've seen him be a little bit more mobile. And honestly, I think it's exactly what we need to see. We can't just go out. While I think we could go out there and put out the exact same team that we did, and the exact same style that we did a year ago, these wrinkles that we've seen already are going to be what really put us over the top. And so I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see the young guys, Colvin, Heidi, Willie Berg. I would love to see us get some run in the non-conference. I think obviously the bench is probably going to shrink a little bit as we get towards the non-conference, but I'd love to see him continue to develop. TKR, I really need to see him get back into a groove. Over the summer and the international trip, he looked really good, but has really just struggled so far to get into the groove. But at the same time, that could be said about a couple of guys. I think once the season gets underway, you're getting into the regular scheduling again. I think we'll see them kind of get back to where we expect them to be. But I'm excited to see Braden Smith get out there and do it again. I'm excited to see Lance Jones, who's been, I think, a very pleasant surprise. He hasn't necessarily been really lighting it up, but in Purdue's second exhibition game, we kind of saw flashes of what he could bring. I'd love to see Colvin continue to develop and get some minutes. I think his biggest hesitation is going to be on defense. We've seen him have some issues, but at the same time, the dude is a freak athlete and a buttery smooth shot, so I don't know if we'll see him on the bench forever. And even Camden Heidi getting out, showing us some good flashes in the first couple of exhibition games, and I'm excited to see what he can do as well, continuing to be a threat. But I think at this point, I'm just rambling. I'm excited for basketball season to get here, and it's going to start here real soon. First slate of college basketball games starts tomorrow or today or November 6th, depending on when you're listening to this. I'm excited for this year. It's going to be a fun year. Big Ten basketball. It's going to be a fun year of Purdue basketball. But that's going to wrap it up for me here on this episode of the pod. We'll be back here in a few days to talk the Minnesota game this weekend, as well as the first round of results in college basketball. I'm looking forward to it. But that's going to do it for me here in this one. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, go ahead, leave a rating on your platform of choice you're using to listen to it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, hit subscribe down below and leave a comment what your expectations are for Purdue and college basketball as a whole this year. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get some sleep because there's only one more night until Purdue basketball is back. That's going to wrap it up for me here. And as always, boiler up, hammer down, hail Purdue.